Everybody seeing a slideshow? Fantastic. Okay, so just in terms of objectives for today, for about the next 50 or so minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about the history and the development of the supervisor competencies. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can potentially use them in some hiring practices. I'm going to talk about the self-assessment tool that is a companion to the competencies, and how that self-assessment tool can be used both for supervisors themselves as well as in collaboration with their supervisor to assess ongoing professional development needs. And then I'm going to end by putting in a plug for the evaluation that I'm doing. So before I bring up the competencies, I just kind of want to set the stage and let you know that we've set them up similarly to the way that we set up the workforce, the FSS and FRS competencies into different domains. These were developed through conversations that I had both with central administration, with supervisors and program managers throughout the New York State system. Both supervisors and program managers had a chance to look at the, not everyone, but a select group had a chance to look at and provide feedback on the competencies. I spoke with other multi-state systems that have sets of competencies and used, bits and pieces of those where I was able. So it was a pretty comprehensive process that we went through to develop these competencies. They are iterative in that, we might tweak them as time goes on. If all of you take a look at them and you have helpful comments or feedback on what you think things should be tweaked or added, I'm happy to hear those and to make changes. We want this to be a working document and be as useful as it possibly can be to programs. So I'm happy to hear feedback and continue to work on them as we need to make them as relevant as possible. But they are organized in these different domains. So let me, I think next I want to just pull up, I'm going to stop sharing for a second, pull up the actual competencies. I did send these out prior to the webinar today. Does everybody have a copy of the competencies? And I'll show you what they look at like. Okay. I can, Stephanie in. Does anyone not have them? You just unmute yourself and let me know if you don't have them, because I can throw them in the chat if needed. Okay, great. Sounds like everybody has them. So this is what they actually look like. And as you can see, they are organized into the different domains. So we have the HSA practices, infant and child health and development, child abuse, neglect and reporting, family functioning and community support, professional practice and process. And then the last one is specific to sort of planning and orchestrating supervision. So these are like the high level competencies, but then we go ahead and break them down as you scroll down the document into sort of these knowledge and skills. So not only do we focus on what supervisors should know in each of the different areas, we also talk about what should they be able to do. And we try to be as comprehensive as possible. We know that, each program might have a slightly different slant on some of these, but we hope that they are, sort of general and comprehensive enough that most supervisors and most programs across the state will, they'll be relevant for most everybody. So we have knowledge and skills for basically every subcategory within the larger domain. So there's knowledge around documentation and skills around documentation. So, we understand that the individual understands the importance and structure of the MIS and that they're able to use the MIS and they have skills in all of those areas. You're going to obviously have supervisors that come on board that have been in the system, that have been family support specialists or family resource specialists, and might have some of these knowledge and skills already, although the documentation they'll do as a supervisor might be slightly different than what they've done as a home visitor. Many of those skills translate and the knowledge translate. You might have supervisors that come in from other parts of your organization, and they might understand some of this, but not be familiar with the MIS. And that might be an area where you'll need to focus professional development and training in that first year or 6 months that a supervisor is with you. So, we tried to lay it out pretty organized and pretty easy to look at. I'm not going to go through every single one. You can obviously look through them. It isn't super, super long. So, we tried to be as concise as possible. But this is where all of the competencies are located. And again, this document will be on our website hopefully by next week, so that you can download copies and share them with your staff. Okay. Questions about that or the organization of the competencies? Great. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about the self-assessment guide and the user guide in a few minutes. So let's talk about how we can use the competencies in hiring. I love Dilbert because he just speaks to my heart, and he's really funny. So I like how they talk about comparing me to the imaginary and you're losing badly, which is a lot of times, I think, how we kind of think about sometimes what we expect in employees, both when they're hired as well as when we're working with them, that we don't have sort of set standards or set competencies. And so people don't always know what the expectation is or what we hope that they'll be able to do within the job. So I took this job description, or the sort of the requirements for the job description, right from the HFNY policy around hiring supervisors. And the first one, is that we hope that they have a master's degree or some kind of degree, but we have obviously things in place where experience can substitute for those degrees, which is often what happens. A solid understanding of the experience, a solid understanding of or experience in supervising diverse staff with humility, as well as providing support to staff in stressful work environments. So this one links directly with the competency that we developed around supervision. So you'll find a lot of language in that competency around supervising diverse staff with humility. Knowledge of infant and child development and parent-child attachment. This is another one that we linked a competency right to it. So that's great. So when we look at writing a job description, you can pull language right from the competencies to put into that job description. Same with experience with family services. That is told are very much parallel to family functioning and community support. Knowledge of parent-infant health is related very closely to child abuse, neglect, and reporting. And experience supporting culturally diverse communities and families. We have a cultural humility competency within the professional practice and process. So hopefully, when you're looking at what those minimum requirements are and you're creating a job description, when you're hiring supervisors, you're able to actually pull a lot of language right from the competencies, and it should be pretty straightforward. So here's one that I put together, again, just using some of the language from the competencies and very much aligning it with the minimum requirements that are expected of candidates. That the candidate should have experience with establishing a comfortable, trusting relationship with supervisees. So this sort of goes beyond that, just should have experience or knowledge in the field of supervision. So we really are looking for very specific things when we're hiring supervisors within our system. You know, we don't just want somebody with supervision experience. We want them to be able to establish a comfortable and trusting relationship. We want them to be able to create an appropriate plan for supervision. We want them to be able to use skills that would enable them to use the parallel process and address family strengths, needs, and safety concerns. We obviously want them to have knowledge of infant and child development, which includes these things, which again are pulled right from the competencies. We want them to have experience with family-centered and strengths-based service provision. We want them to have hopefully an understanding of the process, as well as maybe skills around reporting suspected cases of child neglect, so they can support FSSs in making those reports if needed. And then obviously the cultural humility piece is very, very important and intertwined with all of the things that we do at Healthy Families. So you can see how basically when we're writing job descriptions, you can use this tool to help you develop that you don't need to just pull it out of either thin air or, you know, reinvent the wheel. Many of you are probably writing job descriptions like this all the time. So, you know, it should be fairly straightforward to be able to pull some of that competency-based language and help create competency-based job descriptions. So then taking it to the next stage, you have the job description, you've done some advertising, and you're hopefully getting some resumes. I can't help you with the miracle of getting people to respond to your job interview or your job description and your vacancy announcement. We struggle with that sometimes too at CHSR. I wish I had a magic wand and I could just flood our inboxes with resumes and letters of interest, but I don't unfortunately have the magic wand. But if any of you do, let me know, because we could use that help as well. But let's talk a little bit about how we can write competency-based interview questions, because those are really, really important. You only have a short time with candidates. So my recommendation always, and we've done this at CHSR, you know, it used to be that the first question we would ask someone when they came in for an interview was, tell us about your work experience or your education experience. And the problem with that was that candidates would often talk for like 20, sometimes 30 minutes about things that we already knew that were on their resume, or that were already described in their letter of interest. And so why were we spending our time getting information that we already had from the written materials? That this was our opportunity to really try to get to know the individual, and especially for new people coming in that don't already work in your system, that you might not already be familiar with, it really is your chance to better understand their thinking. They might not have the Healthy Families language yet, but you can certainly probe for those underlying skills and the underlying pieces of knowledge that maybe they just don't have that definition yet to know that it's a Healthy Families thing. So there's things like, what's your approach to supervision? So we know in Healthy Families, we're looking for, you know, people that can do reflective supervision, people that can use a parallel process, people that are systematic in preparing for supervision. So those might be some of the things that you're probing for and that you want to learn from a candidate when they're sitting with you in that room. How do they handle or problem solve tough situations? So we know that supervision is not easy, that home visitors are in really tough situations, and they need that time with their supervisors to problem solve and work through and come up with some solutions and ideas around how to problem solve those tough situations. So are the candidates, how do they do that? How do they help the people that they're supervising problem solve? How do they work as part of a team? How do they take care of themselves? So we know that self-care is of huge importance, especially to our home visitors and supervisors themselves, who take on a lot of the tough situations and problems that their home visitors are going through. So do they already have skills to take care of themselves? And can they help home visitors that might struggle to develop some healthy self-care skills and problem-solving skills? What's their approach to cultural humility, and what is their experience with that, and how do they think about those things? Because again, that's a really important piece to the services that we provide. And are they familiar with, things like reflective supervision or the parallel process? So those are all things that you might not have learned from someone based on their written materials, that it might be worth spending some time talking to them about when you have them face to face. So a couple of examples of competency-based questions that you could potentially ask, or obviously you can come up with your own, or maybe you have a list that you can't get away from, which many organizations sort of have a standard list of questions. If you're able to supplement with additional questions, I think that's always helpful. I think different programs probably have different flexibility with being able to do that. But an example of a competency-based question, I like to use scenarios and scenario-based questions that I try to learn as much as I can about how a candidate might approach a situation or a problem or a scenario. So one example that I came up with, you have a weekly supervision session scheduled. How do you go about preparing for that meeting? So this would help you learn from a candidate how they plan for supervision. Are they looking at documentation? Are they looking at the work that the individual has done throughout the week? Are they looking at information that's in the MIS, and how are they planning for those meetings? So that might be an important thing for you to learn about a candidate during that interview process. And then another example would be during a supervision, an FSS might express they're having difficulty helping a family set realistic goals. So how might you approach supporting the family support specialist? And even if the candidate isn't from healthy families and doesn't necessarily know the exact family goal plan, or isn't necessarily completely familiar with the process that Healthy Families uses to set goals, they still more than likely, if they've been a supervisor in the past, have helped their people that they supervise with problems or issues, or help them work through tough situations. So really what you want to learn is, how does the individual work through those things? What's their problem solving techniques that they use to support the people that they're supervising? Are they able to establish a good relationship with the person that they're supervising, so it's comfortable to talk about those things? Are they using reflective practice and the parallel process? Again, even if they're not using those terms, are they using the ideas when they're providing supervision? So that's what you really want to kind of get at with the questions that you're asking, whether they're these questions or another completely different set of interview questions. Think about what it is that you want to learn about the individual while you have them in front of you. And don't waste your time having them regurgitate the information that you already have, because we only have a set amount of time to kind of learn what we can from the candidate. Questions about that? Does that make some sense in terms of using competencies to either write a job description or set those questions? Some other questions that you might think about asking What do you think the most important skills a supervisor should have? Again, about problem solving, and how do you prepare for a supervision session? And obviously, you can write your own. You don't have to go with these. But one of the other things I like to do, and I highly encourage people that are sitting on an interview committee to do, is to organize the information when it comes in. So I think sometimes, so the way the process used to work at CHSR is we would have an interview, and then we'd sit around as a group afterwards and we'd say, well, do we like that person? Do we think they'd fit in well? And often what would happen is one really strong personality on the interview committee. If any of you ever knew Rose Green, who was our former director at CHSR, you know that she is the definition of a strong personality. And Rose always had opinions about the people that would come in for interviews. And I think it's very easy, especially since she was my boss and our boss, to kind of defer to her. But what I like about kind of taking some time and either preparing a rubric or making some notes before the committee or the group, or even you as an individual, if you're the only one doing the interview, to take some time to really think about that, what you learned during that interview, and to kind of lay it out. And if you use a rating scale, or again, even just making notes, to do that in each of the areas where you're really where you're looking at those skills, and what knowledge and what do you want that candidate to be able to do or to know or be like when they come into the position. So I think it's really important to take that time to think about it, to kind of mull it over, to have everyone, again, either fill out a rating scale or make some notes, and then come together afterwards to be able to talk about it. Because sometimes our gut reactions are not the best reactions. And after we have some time to mull it over, we have maybe either a better sense of what the individual told us, or maybe we've taken some time and what our initial reaction was kind of still stands. So all of that is really important when you're thinking about and interpreting and trying to get to know someone, and if they would be a good fit for a position. Okay, so I'm going to bring up now the self-assessment tool. Does anyone have, before I do that, while I'm seeing all of your faces, any questions or comments about anything that we've talked about so far? Okay, great. So now I'm going to bring up the self-assessment tool. Okay, everybody sees the self-assessment and training tool on the screen. Good. So this is a tool that we developed to kind of work in parallel with the set of competencies. And this allows a supervisor and their supervisor to kind of reflect on the different competencies and think about how confident they feel in each of the different areas. So at first, it'll ask them to kind of indicate what sort of organized orientation or training or professional development activities had they participated in, to the point that they're filling out this form. You can also have them fill out the form sort of when they first start as an initial orientation, and sort of to get a better sense of where they have knowledge and skills already, and where they really need to focus their early time as a supervisor to gain those competencies that you're hoping that they will learn and gather. And then it lays out the competencies, and it basically asks them how confident they feel in each of the different areas. So the very first one, I understand all HSA policies and best practice standards. So that's a pretty big one coming into a supervisor role. And again, some of your supervisors that you're hiring within the system might already have a lot of knowledge about policies and the BPSs. Those that you're hiring from outside might not have as many or as much experience with the policies and the BPSs. So it's asking the supervisor then, how competent do you feel in this area? So maybe they understand them a bit. They've been given the policy manual, they've had a chance to look at the best practice standards, but they still need some time to sort of digest them and use them in practice. So that's fair, right? So you wouldn't expect someone coming in from outside the organization to know everything about HFA or HFNY policies and best practice standards right off the bat. That takes time to learn those things. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have to look up the BPSs every time. So it's something that will ever be part of my working memory. But other people, again, that are coming from within the system might come in with a really strong understanding of what those are. So then what activities, experiences have been most helpful, which can help, I think, a supervisor sort of understand not just where they're getting the information, but also the way that they learn and internalize information. So you have some people that you can sit in front of a computer and they might watch a training and they might be able to gather the knowledge that they need just from doing that or from reading or looking through the policy manual. Other people are going to need to have that experiential and that practice-based learning in order to really become competent in an area. So they might benefit more from shadowing or from talking to their supervisor about a topic. So I think this tool can not just be helpful for the supervisor, but also for the supervisor's supervisor to help identify what are those learning, how does that individual learn best? So you can cater some additional experiences and some additional support in the way that that individual learns best. What support do you need to become more competent? So for some people, it's going to be they just need time to think about it. They just need time to digest it. Some individuals are going to need more training. Some are going to need more conversations and more chances to practice. I tried for each of the competencies to put in sort of a starting point. So for individuals that really don't know where to go for even basic information, this is a place, and it leads them to different websites. A lot of it comes from the Transfer of Learning website, and we'll point them in there as a starting off point, so they can get at least some additional information about the topic. And then this comments and planning area is really a chance for program managers and supervisors to make some notes to basically say, we talked about this. This is the plan for them to become more knowledgeable or to gain more skill in this area. And this is the date that we met. And, just to kind of put in their own reflections about the competency and where the individual is at. Does that make sense as a tool? So really it's meant to be not just a self-assessment, but also sort of a conversation starter and a conversation enhancer for some of these areas and conversations that you as program managers might have with your supervisors, and not just new supervisors, but you can use it as an ongoing tool, and you can check in with the individual at different points to see, okay, here's where you were 6 months ago. Where are you now? How are you feeling in all these different areas? Knowing that not everyone is going to be an expert in all the different competencies right off the bat. Everybody needs some time. And then this user guide, are you all seeing the user guide now? Okay. Kind of explains what I just sort of explained verbally in written form. So it basically gives you and the supervisor instructions on how to use that self-assessment tool. This also takes it a step further and talks a little bit about what I'm hoping to do through the evaluation. So any questions about the self-assessment tool or the user guide before I talk a little bit about the projects that I'm going to be working on for the next year? Okay. So as I kind of mentioned in the beginning, I as an individual and we as a system are really interested in making the most effective and efficient use of people's time that we can. So part of that means that when PCANY or OCFS is coming up with tools and resources, we want to make sure that they're useful and that it's just not sort of another thing. And so part of this project is trying to better understand what resources, what training tools, what activities are most useful to supervisors in that first year of their employment or in their role as a supervisor. So we know that there are a million trainings that new staff need to go through. Some of those are mandatory and we don't have control over whether or not an individual can choose to participate in them or not choose to participate in them. But there are other activities that we do have control over and other resources that we certainly can modify and make better. We have, resources that we can provide to program managers to help all of you better support supervisors. But we need to know what works and what doesn't work, because otherwise it's just like throwing Jello against the wall to kind of see what sticks. So part of what we don't know is, what do supervisors find most helpful? So that's what I'm kind of trying to learn. And the way that I'm trying to learn it is by utilizing the self-assessment tool, which I hope will be useful for programs more generally. But I'm also hoping to use it to take a look at the feedback that is written on it. And again, that will help me understand and answer questions like, again, what activities are most useful for supervisors? What isn't as useful? What are the areas where we do a good job as a system supporting the professional development of supervisors, and where could we do better? So those are the kinds of things that I'm interested in looking at on the self-assessment tools. So what I will be doing, probably beginning in August and over the course of the next year, is taking a look at new supervisors as they come on using MIS data. And then about 6 months after they've been hired, provided that they're still a supervisor within the system at 6 months, I will be sending them the self-assessment tool. Well, I'll also be sending it to their supervisor, sort of with an email and offering, to do a phone call or a Zoom meeting or whatever to explain how I would like to use the tool and my expectation for them to fill it out. And then really hoping that supervisors will take the time to complete the self-assessment and send it back to me. So I can take a look both at 6 months and then again at 12 months for supervisors that are still in their role at 12 months and see if there's any changes. So I'll look not only at the feedback sort of at that one point in time, but then also compare it to the feedback that I receive at 12 months. So that'll help me know and then develop sort of a report of all of the responses that I get. Again, never divulging anyone's individual information or their program or anything that might identify them, but better be able to say, okay, this is about how people are developing in that 6 months between, the 6 months and the 12 months that they are within a supervisor role. Here are the things that we're hearing that they find most useful. Here are the things that really aren't that useful. here are some areas, some competencies and some domains where we really need to focus in on supporting programs, program managers, or the system more generally in learning and helping supervisors learn about those different areas. So that's what I'm hoping to learn. And, I obviously really need people to help provide feedback for that. And so I will be asking for, again, supervisors at 6 months to fill out this form and send it to me, and then again at 12 months. And I'm just hoping to get as many as I can over the course of a year, and then do some analysis of the different data that I get, and again, inform central administration and the system about how we can better support supervisors in their professional development over that first year. Does that make sense? Awesome. Okay. Just have 2 more slides, and then we're done. Okay, we went over those. So some of the questions that I've kind of already mentioned that I'm looking to get to learn or answer from the supervisor evaluation are, again, how competent do they feel in the different areas? What professional development activities were most helpful? Where do they feel like they need additional support to gain more competence? And are there any discrepancies between the supervisor's feedback and the supervisor's sort of self-assessment? And that's important because we know that often individuals either sort of are overconfident about what they know, and actually the longer they're in a role, they might even feel less competent because they've learned that there's so many things that they don't know, or vice versa, that they really feel like they don't know anything or don't have skills in different areas, but they actually really do. So that'll be an area of interest to look at also. All right, and so I'll just give you my email address, and then I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all your faces and see if anybody has any comments or questions. So I'll just give you a chance to copy that down if you want it. And I should say, in case you didn't already get this sense, I'm actually really interested in this, and I really love doing things like writing interview questions and helping people come up with job descriptions, which is clearly not everyone's jam, but I do really love it. So if you're someone who struggles with that kind of thing, and you would like, you have an opening for a supervisor coming up, and you want some help with writing out a job description, or you have an opportunity to sort of revamp the way that you do interviews or the interview questions that you use, and you want some help writing interview questions, I am happy to help with that, which you probably don't hear a lot, but I know all of you are super busy people. And sometimes things like hiring, even though it's super important, kind of gets pushed to the side because of all the fires that everyone is putting out all the time. So it's not easy to be proactive. It's not easy to take on something like redoing all the interview questions that you might ask during a supervisor interview. But again, I'm happy to help or to bounce ideas around. Just reach out to me. I'm happy to do it over email. I'm happy to do it over a Zoom call. If you're not too far away, I'm happy to come meet with you in person. Although I do love going to different places of New York as well. So I'm happy to come to wherever you are and meet with you. But in the interim, does anyone have questions, comments, thoughts about of any of the stuff that I've talked about?
Erin, is there a place to find the template for the supervisor competency self-assessment, that tool?
Yes. So I will send out everything will be on our website. And so it'll all be downloadable. And I'll send out the links to exactly where it is. Once it's posted on the web, it isn't there yet. I should also say I'm going to include a Word document on the website as well as the PDF. I think the Word documents are a little more user friendly if you want to kind of type into them than the PDF documents are. So I'll include both on the website, so you'll be able to download both of those.
Great, thank you.
Anything else? Right, well, if you think of anything, please let me know. Again, as you're reviewing the competencies, if you think of anything that could make them better, or any sort of glaring omissions where we really didn't capture something that you think is super important to have in there, please, again, let me know. Send me an email, and we're happy to keep updating the document. I mean, I don't want to sort of update it every 48 hours, but I'm happy to update it and do another iteration of it with everyone's feedback once the tool is being used, to make sure that it's as user-friendly and comprehensive as possible. So definitely keep me in the loop on that. And otherwise, good luck with using these in your work. I hope they're helpful. And let me know how I can be helpful or supportive in any way to that end of that endeavor. All right, thanks everybody. Enjoy this beautiful day.